There are so many reasons why we should try to avoid as much as possible this kind of ultimate or extreme tools to help people and make the experience better. So for instance, during the hospitalization, invite the community team to meet the person, to give this feeling of continuity, not you are allocated to one, then to another as separate steps.
I say that to be a great clinician researcher, just some traits that you need are you have to be a great listener, you have to be open-minded, you have to value patients and families or caregivers, you have to value empirical evidence, and you must be open to contradiction. Well, today, psychiatrist Professor Andrea Cipriani and his project GALENOS tick all of these boxes. Today, Andrea shares how he is advancing mental health research through his project GALENOS, the Global Alliance for Living Evidence on Anxiety, Depression and Psychosis, all closely related to or part of the epilepsies. If you're new and you haven't done so already, please do like and comment on this episode and subscribe to our channel so as to get more people learning about the epilepsies.
I'm a psychiatrist. In this country, in the UK, my job is called clinical academic. So I see people with mainly mood disorders, treatment-resistant depression or bipolar disorder in the NHS at Oxford Health NHS Foundation Trust. But this is overall, on average, 1 day a week. For the rest of the time, I do research. I have a lab of very talented researchers and clinicians and statisticians, methodologists. We call it Oxford Precision Psychiatry Lab within the University of Oxford, because our aim is to use existing data, existing evidence to personalize treatment for people with anxiety, depression, and psychosis.
Which are common factors or common symptoms, maybe one would say, actually experience with people with an epilepsy, hence the relevance in our conversation. Could you just tell us about GALENOS, just because I think that's a great example of what you just described?
Yeah, and that's the beauty of working in the UK, I think, is the NHS is a service that we provide to everyone. But at the same time, in the UK, we have fantastic opportunities in terms of funding. And one of them is Wellcome, because it's a charity. And they decided a few years ago to focus not only on mental health as a priority, but they also launched a program of research around evidence synthesis, so collecting existing data to identify mechanisms, what we call experimental medicine approach, behind diagnosis, behind treatment, behind risk stratification and personalization in depression, anxiety, and psychosis. So I'm the director of this project called GALENOS, so the Global Alliance for Living Evidence in Anxiety, Depression and Psychosis. And what we are doing is to collect data around specific research questions identified by people with lived experience. And we combine data from human studies, but also from animal studies, with the overarching idea that if we want to identify a mechanism or distinguish signal from noise, the data should contribute and complement each other if we combine data from different type of patients or different type of models, because each type design has their own biases. And the other interesting thing of GALENOS is the living nature. So we update the evidence every 3 months because new data are coming out. So automatically we input this new feedback into the system and produce new results. So we started a couple of years ago, and hopefully we will be able to continue for longer.
And so do you sometimes, due to this data that keeps coming in, are there sometimes things that change, as in, so you may initially present some information in a certain way with a certain tone, and then what you'd already thought about was completely wrong because you had new information contradicting it. Does that happen, or is that what you welcome?
Absolutely. This is the philosophy of the approach, to be driven by data and science, not opinions. And this is definitely something we expect, because the evidence changes over time. I can give you some examples of reviews that we have done. For instance, there's one about new drugs for the treatment of psychotic symptoms. And one of the big questions was, the initial studies didn't show a material effect or more efficacy compared to the standard antipsychotics already on the market. And one of the key points of Galenos is to decide, shall the research go ahead or should we stop here? Because, as we know, waste of money is a huge problem in research. And it was a very nice experiment, because we have embedded in Galenos the voice of people with lived experience, and presenting the results to people with lived experience of psychosis, they said, wait a minute, the side effect profile is very interesting for these drugs. So they're not really causing the nasty side effects that usually antipsychotics do. So there may be scope for these drugs, even if they are less effective than the standard antipsychotics. They may work for specific subpopulation, or they can be used as add-on treatment to other treatments because they have a more beneficial side effect profile. And this is why we published the paper and say research should go ahead, and just to encourage funders to put money in this independent research and assess the mechanism of these new drugs.
That's so interesting, because it makes me think about anti-seizure medication. So sometimes the side effects of those drugs sometimes people are lucky and don't experience side effects, but sometimes they can be pretty severe. But then sometimes we find out, for instance, like with lamotrigine, one of the side effects was that it could help mood stabilization, right? And so there can be really positive side effects. Or another thing it makes me think of is, often people will say the side effects of a drug are worse than experiencing the seizures themselves, and so significantly impact my quality of life that, sod it, I don't want to use that. And so, yeah, it can be, I think, very challenging from a clinician's perspective, because you want to help achieve better quality of life. But often I think we can be trained to just, or primarily look at one thing, and that may be to control seizures. A bit like with people who primarily experience psychosis, I guess most clinicians, psychiatrists will look at, okay, we want to avoid that psychotic episode, but what about the quality of life of the individual?
The problem is, what is fundamentally wrong in the system is we have a medic-centered approach rather than having a patient-centered. And it's not only because, as clinicians, we try to control, if you want, the efficacy of the intervention, and we often forget about the side effects. But the other big issue around this is, I want to get rid of the one-size-fits-all approach, because we were discussing about side effects, but the side effects that may be burdensome for you may be different from me. You mentioned the mood stabilizing effect of lamotrigine, which may be positive. Sedation is another thing that may be positive or negative, depending. I use in my clinic medication that can cause tremor, and depending on your job, if you work as a PA or something, you have to write, of course, that's very problematic, or if you have to drive. So what we need to do is to listen to what people say in terms of preferences around side effects, and try to personalize the intervention and monitor, because things may be wrong. So we can have an assumption, and then when we test this in an individual, things may go wrong. And this is why I see my clinical experience as a sort of journey we do with the patient, and we are working together and walking in the same direction. It's not, I do my job, now it's your turn, bye-bye. And that's what we need to change. And the job you do, Torie, in terms of trying to disseminate this sort of paradigm shift revolution is what we really, well, it's great, but what we really need to aim for.
Thank you. And actually, I love the word you use there, a revolution, because really that's what it is. It is a complete and utter change of mindset that we need. Traditionally, I think in medicine, it's been, well, darling, I do this and I tell you that. Now that's it, mate. No matter, and it's not looking at personalised medicine. It's not looking at a person as an individual. I think we're getting there, but we still need to sort of drive this message home that, in my opinion, that you will actually have, as a clinician, better satisfaction in your work if you more improve the quality of life of the service users, of the patients, or the people with epilepsy, or whatever disease it might be, often a combination. That's going to make you feel better, bring more job satisfaction to you as well.
Yeah, and what you say is very true. And I see some changes. For instance, you mentioned quality of life. 20 years ago, when we did our studies, quality of life was not an outcome we collected during the study. Now things have changed. Sometimes it's the primary outcome of the study. So I'm optimistic that down the line, things will be different. Yes, I agree.
I know a chap, he has schizophrenia, and that's the only diagnosis I know of his. That's the only one he disclosed to me. He has his own place, which is great, but he is doped up to the hilt. Like when I try and talk to him, he has to go, and then he can respond. And he has gained so much weight, and I know this is a common side effect of many, especially antipsychotics, I think, right? But also many anti-seizure medications. He's so alone. And when I spoke to him, I said, how are things going? And he said, I just wish the charity shop was open again so that I could actually do something in the community. And so I think that's kind of like where we need to look at the whole quality of life of people as well. It's not just about medications and trying to stop certain things, right? It's looking at community care as well, right?
As you say, physical health is crucial. It's not just controlling the symptoms, is allow these people to have better quality of life also in terms of physical health. And the rehab or giving back to the community, going back to the community, upscale what they can do, because it's a huge potential. Also because people with lived experience, they have a knowledge that the model we use to say is train the trainer. So if we can, as we do in many instances now, collaborate together, and then each one goes back and then do the same with other communities or networks, that's a gigantic effect in the end, multiplying effect in an exponential way. So yes, quality of life in a broad sense, beyond medication, beyond treatments in general, is the way forward.
And that example I say completely different disease. It's not. Epilepsy and schizophrenia are closely linked, aren't they? But, if I get better sleep, if I improve my mood, I decrease seizure likelihood. And, if I'm fitter, physically, I feel a bit better about myself. My mood improves. Well, and that's just the mental side of it. But also, I'm sure you know more about endorphins and all this type of thing, the good feeling it gives you. So, yes, it's so important to look beyond, I guess, from a clinician's perspective, beyond your office and what happens out there. But so community mental health teams can be really valuable.
It is something we have to do in the community, absolutely. And the other thing linked to this is prevention. So now we need to do our best to put in place things that reduce the risk of relapses.
Having that support network around you is crucial. Do you think that we've got more work to do kind of building those connections between clinicians and community support workers and families and things like that?
We need to make this connection a real thing. 2 levels. One is, as you say, clinical work is not like a tennis match where my aim is to put the ball in your court and then it's your job. So we need to work closely together and reinforce this. It's all our business. It's not just I do my job or homework and then it's done. So, but the other thing is the system, because if you think that, okay, hospitalization sometimes is needed, but it may be, not always, a traumatic experience for people who are hospitalized. And this is a vicious circle. So there are so many reasons why we should try to avoid as much as possible this kind of ultimate or extreme tools to help people and make the experience better. So, for instance, during the hospitalization, invite the community team to meet the person, to give this feeling of continuity, not you are allocated to one, then to another as separate steps.
Totally. And I think that's something that just us as a species like, isn't it? It's regularity. It makes complete sense that to have this person, and having to explain yourself again, over and over. Oh my gosh, it's so annoying. You must hear that a lot, but or perhaps even experienced it. It's like if a GP changes and you have to give your whole story again. So no. Well, thank you very much for that insight. So appreciated. I think the psychiatric aspect is not looked at enough when it comes to the epilepsies and indeed other conditions too. So thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you, Torie.
Thank you to Andrea for sharing with us his incredibly cool GALENOS project, which will help so many people affected by anxiety, depression and psychosis, and therefore so many people who experience this as part of their epilepsy, plus the huge value that he places on personalised medicine and community care. Check out more about Andrea and his work on the website torierobinson.com, where you can access this podcast, the video and the transcription of the entire episode all in one place. And if you're new and you haven't done so already, please do like and comment on this episode and subscribe to our channel so as to get way more people around the world learning about the epilepsies. See you next week.